welcome in to the Strike Zone podcast. I am Joe Hunk, as I am every single week joining you right here on Zone TV. Now, before we get started tonight, let's make sure that you give us a follow, give us a like, give us a share, get a subscription. However you are watching / listening tonight, you can do so, and make sure that you do that just to kind of help us out as we continue to grow the Strike Zone podcast. We are here every single Thursday, and you can watch us on 104.5 The Zone, whether it is on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, or any other place. I was about to say Periscope, but Twitter and Periscope are the exact same thing. And don't forget YouTube TV as well. So we can always make sure that all the way up to the very second that the show is about to start, things change, Mox. Things change. People change. Because I went in to tonight with a question. And matter of fact, you can see it directly over here beside me. The question was going to be Braves, buyers or sellers? It was going to be that simple of a question, because when you do get to this point in time, and we go back 7 days ago, and we know that we were talking about pretty much this exact same thing. Are the Braves buyers or sellers? Well, 7 days ago, Ronald Acuna had 2 good ACLs, and that's not the case right now. We also had an all-star game. We had an amazing home run derby. My pick totally got eliminated in the very first round. I was a Joey Gallo guy. I thought Joey Gallo was just going to go into Colorado and he was going to put one onto the interstate directly behind Coors Field, but that did not happen, and he got eliminated in the very first round. But we do start tonight with some breaking news. If you have not heard, Joc Pederson, who is a former LA Dodger. He was playing for the Dodgers when the Braves played the Dodgers in the NLCS last year. He was playing for the Dodgers during all of their World Series runs, and now he's an Atlanta Brave. But Joe, the Braves made a trade with the Cubs. That's right. The Braves made a trade with the Cubs because Joc Pederson signed with the Cubs in the offseason, and now they're making this trade, or they made this trade with the Braves because the Cubs are sellers. And it's really sad when you have to say the phrase sellers, because you think of it in two different terms. Are you thinking of sellers or the seller? Like your team sucks and they're in the cellar. Right now for the Cubs, they're not in the cellar, but they are going to be sellers at the trade deadline, because with Ronald Acuna gone, they traded Joc Pederson to the Atlanta Braves. His contract is kind of unique, and we'll get into that in just a few seconds. There are going to be more Cubs players that are going to get traded. You are going to see most likely Chris Bryant is going to get traded at some point, possibly Anthony Rizzo. Kimbrel is absolutely going to get traded here in the next few weeks, because all teams want back-end bullpen guys, including the Braves. And so that is going to be one question that we had tonight that I seriously did not think that we were going to go in this direction for the Atlanta Braves, because if you were listening on 3HL earlier today and we started promoting the Strike Zone podcast, I said, I'm going to give you the reason why the Braves should be sellers, and they should drop as many players as they absolutely can, because they have a lot of players that are on one-year contracts. Sell those guys off, get you some minor league talent that could potentially be major league talent next year, and then go at it next year with hopefully a healthy Acuna, a healthy Soroka, maybe healthy Soroka, and also add into the offseason with some of the pitchers that are going to be available. Now, like always, you can always comment no matter where you are watching, Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, or anywhere else. And we do have some comments that are already rolling in. Now, the way this podcast always works is it is going to go as long as you want to talk about what we're talking about. So if you want to talk about the Braves, then absolutely. Yes, I do have a conspiracy theory when it comes to the All-Star game. If we get to that tonight, then absolutely. If not, I'll share it a little bit later. But you have Tomahawk Chop 22 said RTR Hunk, obviously looking directly behind me, seeing the Auburn helmet and the Auburn basketball. I'm not saying that, but I appreciate you hopping on and watching like I always do. Now, Yorkie also hops in and he said that Rizzo to the Braves. Yeah, see, that's okay. That's where we should start, because no, Rizzo is not going to get traded to the Braves. But I really do think the Braves kind of showed their hand in a very obvious way, because with the Joc Pederson trade, you always say, well, what did the Braves give up? Braves gave up a player and his name is Bryce Ball. He's a player that the Braves just drafted 2 years ago. Right now, he is in high A ball, and the reason I kind of stuttered on that is because a lot of minor league baseball teams and the minor league system as a whole has adjusted. So when I heard Rome, I wanted to make sure that it was still high A ball. If you are watching in Tennessee, then the perfect example of this is the Jackson Generals. That was obviously the team that's in Jackson, Tennessee, is no longer because of the retraction that happened in minor league baseball. But Bryce Ball was at high A ball for the Atlanta Braves. He was having and is still having a very solid season at high A ball. He's already got 13 home runs. Matter of fact, he's batting over 300 right now at Rome. But here's the kicker to this, and this is the reason why the Braves are kind of showing their hand with this. Bryce Ball's a first baseman. What position is Freddie Freeman? Kind of see what I'm saying? Because if you don't need a first baseman, which you can always have backups, you can always be looking back on this, but you can afford to get rid of a potential first baseman that could be up in the major leagues in the next 2 or 3 seasons, depending on how well he does. Because if he continues to hit 324, the Braves are going to eventually move him up to Mississippi. By the way, saying the phrase move up to Mississippi is something that you never really considered, because when's moving to Mississippi moving up? But he could be moved up to Mississippi, and depending on, he could finish the season in Gwinnett. Now, you do not trade somebody that could potentially be a corner fielder for you unless you know that you're not going to need him over the course of the next 2 or 3 seasons. Now, obviously, this trade that the Braves just made happened maybe an hour ago as you're listening to this. So there is a question as far as what are the Braves going to do? Look, Austin Riley, who is playing third base right now for the Atlanta Braves, has been a Gold Glove third baseman in the minor league system since he was drafted by the Atlanta Braves. They put him in the outfield just because they wanted his bat at the major league level. And at the time, there really wasn't a space there since Josh Donaldson was on the team. And then you had Johan Camargo. And eventually the Braves made a decision to move Riley to third base. That opened up the outfield for Ozuna. And then there was a DH, then maybe there's another potential spot. But Austin Riley is going to be your third baseman of the future, especially because he's still on that rookie contract. Freddie Freeman has been the question with this because, yes, last week when we talked, I asked the question, should the Braves actually consider trading Freddie Freeman, getting some really high-end rookies or high-end AAA players, some top prospects to bring back and then eventually try to re-sign Freddie Freeman. And in fact, the Braves could have even done and showed their hand as much as to tell Freddie Freeman, hey, look, man, this is going to be the deal that we're going to want to give you in the offseason. And we know you love Atlanta. We want you back in Atlanta. If we can get something better from this and re-sign you, then what would happen is you in your next, say he did a 10-year deal, like he went Bryce Harper, and he did a 10-year deal, then these players are going to be the players that could potentially help you win a World Series as the face of the organization or one of the faces of the organization, because Acuna is also becoming a face of this team. And screw you, Stephen A. Smith, if you're thinking that somebody that can't speak English is going to be a player that can be the face of an organization, let alone a league, because they absolutely can. And I love the fact that Fox actually gave you the double birds by interviewing Shohei Ohtani during the All-Star game because your comment was stupid. Now, there's more questions coming in. Do you think the Braves can afford Freeman when he hits free agency? What I believe is that Freeman is going to give the Braves some sort of discount. Now, a lot of these contracts that you're seeing, they're going to be $250,000, $300,000, $350,000, whatever you're wanting to look at. I think that if the Braves are going to give him that kind of money, then they are most likely, if they are smart, they're going to have to do a direct opposite with the Freddie Freeman deal. What they're going to need to do is they're going to need to make it heavy in the beginning and light in the very end. Now, a lot of times you'll see, like with the Acuna deal, where Acuna is not going to be making $10, $15 million for like another year or two because of the deal that he signed. Ozzy Albies is kind of the exact same way. So in the short term, I would go ahead and make sure that you give Freddie Freeman a bigger deal, but with the beginning of that be giving you the more amount of money, because look, players' ability at some point in time peak. Players' ability, even if they are the face of the franchise, at some point in time, you're going to have to think about either that player retiring or that player possibly getting moved. If your contract is extremely large on the back end, look at an Alex Rodriguez with his deal that he had, that he signed with the Texas Rangers. That was this ungodly number. His number was so big that there weren't that many teams that were going to be able to pay what needed to be paid to get Alex Rodriguez on his team. So if you make that number lower with Freddie Freeman towards the end of his career, then maybe he can transition to another team. The kicker with that is also going to be what is going to happen in the offseason. Now, you've started to see some of these conversations and some of the rule changes, as they're being called, that are going to potentially happen in 2022. We've already heard about how the 7-inning doubleheaders are going to be going away. If you ask Rob Manfred, which, man, do you really want to trust him? But the other things that they've talked about getting rid of, and one thing that's probably going to get talked about being added is going to be the fact that you're going to get to add that DH in the National League. That's going to happen. 2022 is going to have a DH. And the reason for that is because it's 2021 and 2022, and not having a DH in the National League is still one of the most laughable rules in sports. As much as we complained about the NFL and their catch rule and what is a catch and what isn't a catch and things like that, it's stupid that the National League does not have a DH. Not because I'm a traditionalist or I'm not a traditionalist and I think that it should be going away. The reason why it is the case is because you have pitchers, for instance, looking at the pitchers, your Ian Andersons, your Max Frieds, these players. And yes, I know Max Fried had a game-winning hit and everybody went crazy, and I understand that. But the biggest problem with this is when a player goes into high school now and they finally graduate, when they go into the either college or the minor league system, there is a DH from the age that they are 17 or 18 years old, depending on whatever year they turn pro, whatever year they go into college, all the way up until they make it into the major leagues. There's a DH throughout the minor league system. Now, for people that don't realize that, you've got to think about this. Where we're located in the South, and it depends on if you're looking at your Nashvilles or if you're looking at the Southeast, or that used to be the Southern League in Double-A baseball. When you're looking at Nashville, like they're playing Louisville tonight, you know, some of these teams, yes, Milwaukee and Cincinnati are both National League teams, but then you turn around and you also see that in these Triple-A leagues, you're going to have National League and American League teams that are playing in the exact same league in the minor league. So you can't say, hey, National League teams, if you're a National League affiliate, you're going to have a DH, or you're not going to have a DH. And your American League affiliates, you are going to have a DH. So you can't go back and forth with that when it comes to your DH. So you have to make it universal. So now these pitchers who have not hit in college, they have barely hit in high school, and then they do not even hit in the minor leagues. You're putting them in the National League and say, hey guys, hit. I know you haven't picked up a bat. I know really you can't pick up a bat, because any time that you could be spending in a batting cage is also time you could be looking at film on how to get somebody out, and that's way more important. Which is another reason why what Shohei Ohtani is doing is absolutely amazing. So with the DH is going to most likely be added in 2022. That is going to be another place that Freddie Freeman could eventually transition to, and that could make his career last a little bit longer as an Atlanta Brave. Now, going into tonight, I was still wondering what the Atlanta Braves were going to do when it does come to the trade deadline and what you do with the Freddie Freeman, because he is a franchise player. He is somebody that is, as he continues as an Atlanta Brave, he's most likely going to have his number retired at some point in time, because he is that type of legacy player for the Braves. But I went into tonight, leaving 3HL in the studio, I was going to be sell. Now, as you're listening right now or watching, if you are watching on Zone TV, let me know what you think as we go throughout the evening for the rest of the night talking about this, because yes, if you are just hopping in, Joc Pederson has been traded to the Atlanta Braves. Now, the contract is going to be the interesting part of this, and I think this is another reason why the Braves did make this trade for Joc Pederson as we're talking about going into 2022, because I truly believe that the Braves should be sellers. I think that they should trade Drew Smyly. I think that they should trade Charlie Morton. And if somebody were to throw the kitchen sink, starts to sound like Ronald Slay right there. But if you do throw the kitchen sink out at Freddie Freeman, and you were to give up some of the best prospects in baseball, you take that deal and you explain to Freeman, we want you back in Atlanta, but for the next 2 months, go try to win yourself a championship, and then bring that knowledge that what you got throughout the playoff run back to this locker room, and let's win a championship next year. Because there's a real good possibility that the Braves were going to play this right. You could get a lot of prospects back and continue to have a very good young team. And the other part that comes into this is you kind of really want to figure out what some of these minor leaguers have. And don't bring up Christian Pache, because he is struggling big time for Gwinnett. If you are a Nashville Sounds fan, you've been watching the Sounds play over the course of the last week or so, you've seen the fact that he may even be batting 200, if that, right now in Gwinnett. He's got to figure some things out. The one player that I really want to see on the major league level is Drew Waters, because he is tearing it up. And I think that could be a very good progression for him to move him up to the major leagues. Now, the big question when it comes to Drew Waters now isn't about the contract, because with contract management, you want to make sure that you bring a player up late enough into the season so that you can continue to have an extra year of control. That won't be a thing when you're talking about bringing a guy up after the All-Star break, because now the Braves only have somewhere around 73 games remaining in the season. There's no way that somebody like a Drew Waters is going to get the at-bats that he needs so that this would count as a year of his deal. So bring him up. Bring some of these minor leaguers up that are doing well in Gwinnett and get them some experience. See, I know that a guy like a Bryce Wilson, who we've seen come up and go back down and come up and go back down between Atlanta and Gwinnett, and between Atlanta and Gwinnett, is a pitcher that right now he's not even pitching that well in Gwinnett. And look at like what's happening for the Nashville Sounds. Look, the Nashville Sounds in Milwaukee have a really good AAA baseball team, and they have got a really good group of pitchers down in the AAA level that are basically just sitting there, because with the way that the minor league system is working, especially with Milwaukee, they don't need to bring up any starters right now because they have a very good top of the pitching staff. They don't need to bring anybody. If anything, they need to make a trade, maybe trade one of these players that are with his. I mean, was it Lindblom that's pitching tonight? He's already got like a 1 ERA right now in his 3 or 4 starts that he's made for the Nashville Sounds. He's pitching extremely well. Ethan Small, he played in the Futures game. He came in really kind of a sucky situation. I really don't even look at what he did in the Futures game as something to kind of hold against him because he's a starting pitcher, and you brought him in the last inning with 1 out and in a bad situation where he gave up a couple hits and gave up some runs, but then he turned around and he also struck out the last 2 batters to end the game. So those players are some that honestly, if Milwaukee wanted to try to bring in somebody, heck, even look at like somebody like a Charlie Morton, you bring him in to be a 3 or 4 for Milwaukee, which them right now leading the NL Central, then the Braves could 100% be able to turn this around and turn it into having a really good number 4 or 5 pitcher that could be behind Fried, or if Soroka is healthy, or possibly looking at some of these other pitchers that the Braves have, you could really get something out of this. Now let's look at some of the comments that are going it. And if Yorkie agrees, hey, look, you know, it's stupid if you think that pitchers should hit. No, look, I don't believe the pitcher should hit, and the DH is going to be something that the National League is going to take advantage of in the next couple of years. Also, Tomahawk Chop says it scares me that he is from California. No, and I agree with you. And look, the Anaheim Angels have done a lot of stupid things over the past couple of years, but I could get why you would think about maybe because Jared Wash, who was came up as a first baseman. He can also play the outfield. They could potentially transition him to the outfield and possibly try to trade or sign Freddie Freeman in the offseason if the Braves don't get it done and he goes back to California that way. You add Freeman into a Mike Trout as well as a Shohei Ohtani and Wash. I mean, God, the Angels have so much potential. They just never can do anything well with it. And so that's the one. He wouldn't go to the Dodgers because the Dodgers are kind of set when it comes to majority of their defense. Now, San Francisco's another way. Brandon Belt has been at San Francisco for decades. If you play MLB The Show, God, I hate facing him. He's just so annoying. Seattle could be another option just because that team in the AL West is one that could really, really be good in the next year or two because they're starting to bring up a lot of this talent. The Mariners have one of the best minor league systems in baseball, and you're really starting to see kind of how that team is growing in the AL West. But I could see Freddie Freeman being an Angel if he potentially wanted to be because of being in California. And Tomahawk Chop says, yeah, he grew up as an Angels fan. I mean, so it would make perfect sense. Matt says that he agrees. That definitely think it's time to give Wright, Tukey, and Wright a 10 and 15 starts in the second, or give them 10 to 15 starts. And I think that the problem is, and Kyle Wright had a really good outing against the Sounds in the first part of that doubleheader where they faced them a couple of weeks ago. He threw a complete game shutout. He only gave up like 1 hit, and it was a very good pitching performance for him. He needs more of those. Tukey's struggling in the minor leagues, and he has not been doing good for Gwinnett right now. And I think that that's going to be a big question mark about what his role is going to be, because this is the reason, especially even late sometimes, that you bring a pitcher up. And you bring these pitchers up because of the fact that you want to see what they're going to do at the major league level. Kyle did have some success at the major league level, but I think that he's in his own head and he's still trying to figure it out in Gwinnett. And I think that if he does figure it out, then absolutely he should get another shot on that. I think the Braves do have a couple of pitchers in Gwinnett that they should give the opportunity to, if anything, in the bullpen, because the thing about this Braves team and what could potentially be happening at the trade deadline is you do have about 5 teams right now that are buyers, that are 100% buyers. Mets are going to be buyers. The Brewers are going to be buyers. We just talked about those. And the 3 teams, I don't know why I'm doing it like I'm doing Vanderbilt, but the 3 teams in the NL West, those 3 teams are going to be making the playoffs. We just don't know what order. So Dodgers, Padres, and Giants, they're all going to be making these deals. And if the Braves, because this is the big question, and honestly, they could flip Joc Pederson in the next week or 2. They've got to face the Rays starting tomorrow. They still have to face the Phillies. They have to face the Padres. And you're talking about this. These are all 3 teams that could be in a playoff hunt. Padres definitely are. Rays definitely are. And so you could potentially see these players with the Braves, even though the Braves just traded for Joc Pederson, flip him Mike Piazza style and trade him off and get something back depending on how well he does for Atlanta. Because what is happening is you're going to have a lot of teams that are going to be looking at a short sample size. We remember Charlie Morton at the very beginning of the season. He had a 5 to 6 plus ERA. He wasn't pitching well. The last month and a half, he's been pitching really good. Smiley's been pitching really good. And so this, to me, is screaming the Braves are going to do something, see where they're at after this week, and then make a decision. They're not buyers or sellers yet. What they've done with Joc Pederson is he has about, I want to say a year and a half, or I should say he's got a 2-year deal. The second year is a mutual option. There are 3 types of contracts when you give a player an option. You have a player option, a team option, and a mutual option. So if it is the player option, okay, that's pretty self-explanatory. Hey, the player's like, yep, I want to stay. Boom, I agree to be here for another year. Team option, that's if the team sits down and says, hey, you did well, we want you back. Okay, then the mutual option, which is what Joc Pederson has, is both he and the Braves have to agree. There's like $10 million left on this contract for Joc Pederson going into next year. Braves are not agreeing to that. So Joc Pederson's only going to be either here for like 2 or 3 weeks, or he's just going to be here through the end of the year. Braves are not going to go on with the option, and Joc Pederson's going to be a free agent at the end of the year. So that's where this contract is going to be something where basically the Braves are only going to be paying him $1.5 million for this season, and then they're done. So that's why this is hey, look, let's get somebody in the outfield that has a great personality, that's a great locker room guy. And if we happen to win a couple of series here and we're only 3.5 games back from the Mets right now, if we're still only about a game and a half back of the Mets once we get close to the trade deadline, let's see what kind of deals can be made. And then potentially we can get back in this, because the NL East is still god-awful. And I mean god-awful. The Braves can still win this, and it would be the craziest thought that without Acuna, without Sean Newcomb, without Soroka, without Ozuna, the Braves, who all 4 of those guys played a humongous role for the Braves getting to the NLCS last year, all injured, and the Braves could still somehow make it to the playoffs. That would be an amazing feat. So let me ask you, we remember the 14 in a row, the 14 division titles, 1991, all the way to 2005 or whatever it was when the Braves were continuing to win. It was something that every Braves fan knew. Hey, look, we were going to be in the playoffs. Does that play into any of your thought process right now if you are a Braves fan of, hey, we've already had 3 in a row, let's make it 4 in a row. Let's start a new streak. I'm curious. Comment as you're watching, wherever you're watching, on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, Facebook Live, and anywhere else that you could be listening. Make sure that if you are listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, give us a review. We appreciate it. It absolutely helps us out. Every single time that anybody's looking for a baseball podcast, they'll be coming to us. So you have Jeff here that says, I'd be afraid that if we trade Freeman away, he wouldn't come back. I don't disagree with you. I really don't. And when you were looking at the fact that is July 15th, as we're talking right now, you've got about 16 days to figure out what you want to do. If you do not sign him, and I look, as I'm speaking, I 100% believe Freddie Freeman will be the Atlanta Braves first baseman on opening day, barring any injury, because injuries happen. If he is injury free, then he will be the starting first baseman for the Atlanta Braves on opening day next year. I totally believe that. This is about getting the most for him, depending on the situation. Freddie Freeman says he doesn't want to care and doesn't want to talk about his contract and a contract extension and all that. Well, that's because he has an agent that is talking right now with AA, and they're trying to get this deal, and they're probably doing it, and he doesn't have anything to do with it. So no, he doesn't want to know anything about it right now, but they're going to have a conversation in the next 2 weeks. If you're the Braves, and teams have done this, if you are now 6, 7, 8 games back, and it's July 30th, do you risk not getting anything and Freddie Freeman potentially walking away because, let's just say, the Anaheim Angels make a decision and he rolls? I mean, that's a legit question. And I agree. There's people on our chat right now that do say that Freddie stays in Atlanta. I think he's an Atlanta Brave. I do. But it doesn't mean you can't rent him out for one season knowing that you're going to re-sign him at the very end. And so, Matt, I asked a question just a few seconds ago about if you're a Braves fan, you grew up in the 90s, you remember the 14 division championships in a row. The Braves have won 3 in a row. Does the streak matter to you, as the Braves have kind of started a small miniature streak as compared to what they did in the 90s and the early 2000s? Matt says, makes no difference from me. Just don't see them going anywhere, even if they do make the playoffs. That's my thought. In fact, I was talking with somebody on Twitter earlier today, and I said, look, what's the end game for this Joc Pederson deal? Because you still have a bullpen that is blowing leads. You do have a decent pitching staff, but it's not the all-star staff. If anything, you make it to the NLDS and you get eliminated by the Giants, the Dodgers, or the Padres, because you are going to, well, no, correction. You would actually be facing the Brewers is what you're going to be facing. Is whoever wins the division is going to be playing the NL Central, because the wild card teams are going to be coming out of the West, and the best record in the National League right now belongs to the NL West. So you'll most likely either have a all NL West playing each other, and then you're going to see the Central and the East playing each other. So can the Braves beat the Brewers? That's where this is coming down to, because the Cubs have fallen too far behind. The Cardinals are falling too far behind. The Brewers have had an amazing run recently, and that's where this question is now going to lie. And we have Capsule? We're just going to say that. Says, I don't think it really matters when it comes to the NL East. Like you said, the NL East is trash. Maybe if that division had better teams, then it would be something. Look, and there have been parts of this run that the Braves made in the 90s and early 2000s where the NL East was trash. I mean, there were times. Look, if you go back and look at some of these Braves teams, especially in the middle 2000s, you're looking at some of these players like, how on earth did the Braves even make the playoffs? Then you can also turn around and you can see these Braves teams of like, say, 2001, or when the Braves it's either 2001 or 2002 when the Braves were leading baseball in home runs, and you had Galarraga and you had Gary Sheffield and you had those teams, and this team was amazing and they didn't do anything. And so you can kind of look at it because they lost to the division series, and you're thinking, well, this team sucks, and how on earth can they be this good? So it's kind of a catch-22, and says couldn't do it with last year's roster, certainly not doing it with this one. No, I agree. And I thought going into this season that the Braves did not do enough in the offseason to become a World Series contender. What the Padres did, adding Yu Darvish and making the trades that the Braves did have, or the trades that the Padres did make, then they, to me, made the moves that the Braves should have made. Adding Melancon, I mean, that's another big deal. I don't think that it gets talked about enough when that losing Melancon has been a big loss for the Braves when it comes to the back end of that bullpen. Matt also says that if Acuna injury doesn't happen, I could see maybe going for it. No, I agree. Look, the moment the Acuna injury happened, and it was last Saturday, or it was Saturday night, so it was about 5 nights ago. When that injury happened, I was sitting beside a friend, and I initially said, all right, well, that's the season. Punt. Trade guys away that are on these 1-year deals that are not coming up for arbitration. Get the players, get some minor league players that you can, get something out of this, and really start seeing what you have in this minor league system, because you call up some of these players that you've kept down in the minor leagues, and let's see if they can sink or swim, or at least see that if there's something there that you can build on going into 2022. That was my initial thought. So the Joc Pederson trade today was actually extremely confusing for me, because I get it from the Cubs standpoint, the contract, getting rid of him, they don't need him. There was, again, the mutual option that the Braves now take over, and the Braves do have a hole in the outfield that they've got to have to fill, and Joc Pederson has played center field for the LA Dodgers. He's played some center field for the Cubs. Most likely he's going to be playing one of the corner positions, and that could be something that can really kind of act as a stopgap. I'm really going to be curious as to if and when the Braves bring up Drew Waters. That's the one that I'm interested about. Until Pat Shea can actually fix what he's doing in Gwinnett and start hitting well down there, then he doesn't need to be coming up. Same thing goes for Touki Toussaint. I want to say Touki has like a 5+ ERA, and that's just sitting here talking between you and I. We go to Tomahawk Chop 22. He says, such a bright idea to sign a DH to a big contract when you are in the NL. And that was a chance. That really was a chance. And I think that looking back and going back to 7-8 months ago, I mean, if we're talking now, we're in July. In December, I think that a lot of baseball fans going into the winter meetings thought that the DH was going to be here to stay. And the reason it is not is because right now, Major League Baseball and the Major League Baseball Players Association is in a conversation for the collective bargaining agreement. That's the reason why you've heard about the 7-inning doubleheader going away, the extra base or the extra inning player on the base rule going away as well. Those were what Rob Manfred is calling pandemic solutions. The DH is going to be a major conversation, and it probably already is a major conversation when it comes to the collective bargaining agreement for Major League Baseball. You're also going to hear about the potential of going back to the wild card and the playoff rounds like what we saw last season. That's going to be talked about. There's going to be a conversation about players and the length of the season again. I think that's going to be connected with the MLB playoffs and how long or short that they potentially go. That's going to be part of this as well. The DH is going to be a major, major point, because what you're talking about with the DH, it isn't so much about the DH. What it is about is now you're going to have 15 more players that are going to be able to sign, most likely, massive contracts because, let's be honest, most DH mash the ball. And so these now are not going to be players that have to look at AL only. See, that was the thing about Albert Pujols, and it's actually kind of surprising that he's kind of played as much for the Dodgers that he actually has, but that's the reason why he went to the Angels, is because of the DH and because it was going to allow him to have a much longer career than what he would have had if he was been in the National League with the Cardinals. So there's going to be tons of players like that are going to be able to extend their careers. A perfect example of this is going to be Buster Posey. Buster Posey has had so many injuries. In fact, he missed the All-Star game because of another injury. And having a DH is going to be able to say, look, as a guy that finished his career as a catcher in college, trust me, it is crazy at how much your knees hurt after just catching one ball game, let alone 162 or 150 or what some of these catchers do. Even moving him to first base doesn't save the body all that much. Being able to sit down and to kind of take a game or two off but still be able to hit, Buster Posey could really take advantage of a DH. A lot of catchers could. Tomahawk Chop also asked, do you think that Alex Anthopoulos realized that the DH wasn't coming back in 2021? When they signed Ozuna, the decision hadn't been made about the DH. And I think that was the biggest thing, is because Major League Baseball made this decision. In my opinion, they made the decision to pull the DH because they want to put it on the table for the collective bargaining agreement to have some sort of chip that the players want going into this agreement, so that the players have to give up something that Major League Baseball wants, whether it's an extra, it would be an extra games in the postseason, or if it was fewer days off. Because look, before this COVID thing hit with the Boston Red Sox and the New York Yankees tonight, they were going to be upset. And there was a lot of people that knew the Red Sox and Yankees were upset because they were going to have one fewer day of All-Star break vacation than every other Major League team, because Major League Baseball has made the decision that the Thursday before the second half of the season starts, they're going to have a marquee game, no matter what it is. It just happened to be Red Sox Yankees this year, that they're going to have a marquee game that is going to be played on that Thursday to kind of kick off the second half. And when you're talking about these days off and things like that, that's what these players are looking for. They're trying to find more days where they can make sure that they save their bodies going into this 162 game season. And Caleb asks, do you think Joc will DH next year? No. I don't think that Joc Pederson is going to be a member of the Braves next year. I think this is an effort by the Braves that they probably contacted the Cubs about a Chris Bryant, a Kimbrel, trying to bring him back to the Braves. They talked to them about that. And then probably, and honestly, it could still happen, but they then got to a point where they needed an outfielder, and the Cubs offered Joc Pederson. And when they said, well, who do you want? And I think it's Jed Hoyer is the new general manager and president for the Cubs since Theo went to Major League Baseball, they said, all right, well, give us this guy, which is Bryce Ball, a high A ball first baseman who is playing very well. I'm not going to say that he's not playing very well, but the Braves have only had him in the system, honestly, for 1 year, because people forget minor leagues didn't have a season last year. It was 2019, 2020, all the minor league players were off, and now they're in the 2021 season. So this is really his first full season in the minor leagues. And I think the Braves said, look, we can take this risk because most likely we're going to have Austin Riley at third base and we're going to have Freddie Freeman at first base, and we don't need to do this. Jameson asks, I think this is a really good move, or he says, I think this is a really good move by the Atlanta Braves front office to tell the team we still have a chance to win the division. Look, I agree with you. I really do. This was not the move that I was expecting. And I really was expecting, in the end, and there's still 16 days until the trade deadline. In the end, I thought, and I still think, the Braves are going to be sellers. What's going to change this is if the Rays come in and the Braves are playing the Rays and the Braves sweep them, or the Braves sweep the Phillies, or they sweep the Padres, or they do something crazy like that, or take 2 of 3 in every single series or something. And then as they get closer to the end of July, they're only a game and a half back. That's what I could see. Now, if the Braves do these series and they get swept in every single one and they're 9 and 10 games back, then they're waving the white flag and they're going to trade these guys that have the 1 year's deal. I could see them flipping Joc Pederson. I could see them trading Charlie Morton and Drew Smyly. Those are the ones we've talked about. Matt said, would love to see Kimbrel back with Atlanta. Wish he would have never been traded. That trade, I lean back in my chair because that trade still hurts me, because Kimbrel got traded to San Diego and he was a part of that huge trade. Look, I understand, and this is where we're at with Freddie Freeman as well, is that it was a contract deal. And that was the reason why when he got traded, I believe it was Upton that got traded in that deal as well. I mean, there was a bunch of people that were involved in that trade that the Braves had. And when they made that trade, that was a punch in the gut. As somebody that is from Huntsville, when you play baseball throughout your career in high school, little league, you do a lot of travel ball the way that I did. I still feel like at some point in time, Kimbrel and I played against each other. We're around the same age, so we'd be playing around in the same parks. I've actually watched some documentaries that he's had, and he's talking about these stadiums and these places that he played at, that I played at. So I feel like we were playing at the same places at the same time. So somebody that's from the same area, and I really appreciate how he's grown. I would love to see him back as a Brave. And I think that he would love to be back here because he's a really big family person. And both Atlanta, and this is also something with Kimbrel that I don't think a lot of people realize, is that Kimbrel has, I want to say it's a daughter. He has a child that had a lot of medical issues when they were first born. And that was part of the reason why he wanted to stay in Boston, is because anybody knows hospitals, Boston has some of the best hospitals in the country, as a matter of fact, in the world. And so it was a big deal for him to be around a good hospital for them. And so same things kind of happened is whenever you're looking at them. So being around family, which all of his family is in North Alabama, I think that'd be a really good deal for him to come back to the Braves at some point in time. And goes, all right, so Neil asks, what are your thoughts on Snitker? Regardless of how the season ends, I'm a defender of him, but maybe time. I think Snitker is an absolute amazing coach. I think that he's a player's coach that knows how to push the right buttons, but he's also a player's coach where he's going to defend them at the right times. You see that he can make these decisions a lot of times to come out and defend his players when he really feels like they need him. There's only one other person, and this is kind of a deal where when you look back at teams, if you're going to get rid of somebody like Snitker, which I do not believe the Braves should, there's only one person that I would want Anthopoulos going after, and that is Tampa Bay, and that's Kevin Cash. I think he is the most brilliant manager in baseball. I think that with what he has done with Tampa Bay, obviously following Joe Madden, but what Kevin Cash has done by adding the opener, coming in with those ideas, changing and taking a team that really, in all honesty, there's no reason why the Tampa Bay Rays should be as good as they are. But the reason why they are so good is because they are a humongous analytic baseball team. They look at things differently, and they have to. There are some teams that are in professional baseball right now that do not use analytics like they should. Pittsburgh, Kansas City are two teams that should 100% use analytics. Marlins should use more analytics. The Phillies should actually use analytics, and that's actually the reason why they fired their manager last year, is because he used too much analytics and they didn't like him. By the way, he's the manager of the San Francisco Giants right now, who have the best record in baseball. Just saying. There are a lot of those teams that should be using more and more analytics. The Braves, even though they will spend some money, they're not going to spend like the Red Sox, the Dodgers, the Yankees, and those teams, or Cubs. And I think that they could use somebody like a Kevin Cash, but that's the only move that I would make when it comes to Snicker. And that's also very similar to what the Cubs did do back in 2014, going into, I believe, either 2015 or 16, whenever Joe Madden eventually took over the Cubs. Theo Epstein actually sat down with the manager and said, look, the only reason that we are going to let you go is because we're looking at one manager and one manager only. We think that this is the manager that can do it. It's a tough truth, but doing something like that is really, really different. Now, we also have, let's look back in the comments, see where we're at. Jameson says that, yes, I agree that trade of Kimbrel still hurts me as well as an Atlanta Braves fan. No, that trade, other than the Mark Teixeira trade, which I don't think enough Braves fans understand just how stupid that trade was for the Braves to add Mark Teixeira when you look back at what the Braves actually gave. Matter of fact, let me pull this up because this is just how stupid this trade was. Mark Teixeira trade. I'm 100% Googling this right now. And this is the reason why, is because if you do not know what the Braves gave up, it is argued by some as the worst trade in baseball history. So here's what the Braves gave up. They gave up my absolute favorite player in baseball history, which is Jared Saltalamacchia, Elvis Andrus, Nefi Perez, Matt Harrison, Bo Jones. Or Elvis Andrus, Jared Saltalamacchia, as well as Perez, were all a part of either the Red Sox teams when they won the World Series in 2013, or they were a part of the Texas Rangers teams that made it to the World Series in 2011 and 2012. Yes, those were the two teams. So it was a dumb trade. That trade with Kimbrel is pretty close up there. Now, there have been some benefits of the Kimbrel trade, and you got to have to look back at that and say, like, okay, the Braves did get this, and that's like, okay, it wasn't so horrible. So now with the Kimbrel trade that the Braves did make, the Padres got Kimbrel and BJ Upton, Melvin Upton. And at the time, the Braves got Cameron Maybin, who he was serviceable for the Braves. Carlos Quentin, which I believe the Braves actually DFA'd like right when he got there. And Jordan and Matt Whistler. That was the one that the Braves really thought, or Whistler, whatever. He doesn't play for the Braves anymore. But that was the one that the Braves really thought that they were going to get something out of that. And I think that was the reason why the trade, some people thought, okay, this is going to be okay. Caleb Asca, the Braves heavy into analytics. I think to an extent, all teams are now starting to get more and more into analytics. The Dodgers have a humongous analytic program. I mean, like, they basically have an office that is just filled with computers. Like, if you ever remember whenever you were like in high school and you went to the computer lab, like, think about that, and all these people are doing analytics for the Dodgers. So the Dodgers are big into that, but they can also just turn around and just buy people. So, hey. But no, I think the Braves that's something the Braves really need to get into more. It's called controlling the plate. and it's something that not enough teams do, and that is one thing that I do think the Braves should get a lot more. Matt then says Salty just never could quite put it together. No, I agree. He absolutely could, especially with the Braves. And I thought that I thought at one point in time he was going to be Brian McCann's replacement, and he just never could get it together. Then when he went to Texas, he was a much better player. He won a World Series with the Boston Red Sox. Matter of fact, he was the catcher that was actually catching for the Red Sox when they won the World Series. He was the one jumping into the arms. When you look at the celebration picture from 2013, that was Saltalamacchia. So he got himself a ring, so you really can't complain too much about that. What trade did the Braves get freed in? Was it the Padres? All right, let me look real fast to see how the Braves acquired Max Fried, because I thought that the Braves drafted him, and I could totally be wrong on that. No, he was a San Diego Padre. So looking at this deal, that's right. The Braves made 2 deals with the San Diego Padres. I forgot about the second deal. So the Padres actually, this one happened in 2014. This is how Justin Upton got to the Padres with BJ Upton. So it was Malik Smith, it was Dustin Peterson, it was Jace Peterson, and it was Max Fried that came to the Braves for Aaron Northcraft and Justin Upton. I totally forgot that the Braves made 2 separate trades with the San Diego Padres, and that was part of this part of the Braves staff that's just so bad. It's just really, really bad. Yeah, Jeff says Justin Upton trade. Yeah, there was a BJ Upton trade, which is the one Kimbrel was a part of, and then there was the Justin Up trade that also sent him to San Diego. Man, you want to talk about dark times? Ugh, now we're bringing up some stuff that could really hurt. Jameson says, of course, I will trade that the Braves made for JD Drew when we gave the Cardinals Adam Wainwright, which is still haunting us even today. No, that was also a bad deal. And I know that JD Drew had some good times, but I never really was a fan of him. Even when he goes back to, he was drafted number 1 overall, I want to say, by the Philadelphia Phillies. And then you spin it around. And after he was drafted by the Phillies, I think he said no. And then the very next season, he was drafted again by St. Louis. If I remember that correctly, somebody can check that and let me know if I'm right about it. The Simmons trade definitely hurt. Hated that move so much. I was always weird when it come to Andrelton Simmons, because Simmons was a very good defensive player. But it hasn't been really until recently, maybe the last year or two, that his offense has really started to kind of pick up, speaking of the Angels. And I really think that defensively, it really sucked, because you went through a period of time after him that you really didn't know who your shortstop was going to be. But I thought that in the end, his glove wasn't good enough to kind of keep him around, because it was a Gold Glove, but we need more offense. And I just felt like he was always just going to be that number 8 guy in a period of time in Major League Baseball that was more offensive. And Simmons just didn't fit that. I just really just don't think he did. And yeah, Jameson says, yeah, Max Fried was a part of the Justin Upton trade, not the BJ Upton trade. Jeff says, let's say everything goes the way the Braves want and we become contenders. Who do you think AA chases to put us over the top? One, I do think is Kimbrel, because I think that Kimbrel is going to be a major piece of the back end of a bullpen. The Braves absolutely need that. I think that even just adding Kimbrel could be something that the Atlanta Braves could push them to a division title. And yes, I'll say division title. I'm not even going to step back on that. Division title, I think, was going to be one. If you're talking about World Series or NLCS, I think with Kimbrel, you try to see what you could get for Chris Bryant. offensively that helps you out in the outfield, because let's not even kid ourselves. These players that the Braves have right now that are playing the outfield, did anybody know any of their names going into this season? And it is that one's tough. Let me think about this. In a week, things could absolutely change. Matt says, disagree with you. Simmons is the best defensive shortstop I've ever seen. No, I'm not. Let me emphasize this. I do believe that Simmons was hands down and arguably one of the greatest shortstop gloves that we have seen in the last, I'm going to say 20 years, because I'm never going to compare him to somebody like an Ozzie Smith or something like that. Or Jeter, you can kind of sit and go, okay. He did have his gold gloves, but he never had the range that Simmons had. Simmons was an amazing defensive player, and I truly do mean that, okay? But offensively, you needed more production, is what I'm trying to say. And Jameson says it would be nice to bring Kimbrel back. And look, Matt, I'm kind of with you. And honestly, here's the thing, okay? The Ozzie Smith deal, and Mickey, I'm sorry if you are listening. The Cardinals are just a team that I hate. I hate them with a passion. There's no logical reason. That my first reason that always comes to mind is the 96 NLCS, but the Braves won that. Like, yes, the Cardinals were up 3-1, and the Braves came back to win that one in 7. And I want to say that Game 7 of that was like 15-1, and it was just a laughing stock. Okay, what I didn't realize going back is that 96 NLCS was Ozzie Smith's last season. That he was retiring. And if you go back and watch, and you can find this on YouTube, if you go back and watch the All-Star game, or not the All-Star game, but the Game 7 of the NLCS, towards the very end, they really start to show a lot of Ozzie Smith. And so that's the main reason I remember Ozzie Smith. I do remember him from the early 90s. And if you play MLB The Show right now, seriously, how hard is it to hit with that guy? Like, it is so bad. Like, that rookie card that you're having to hit with, you're trying to get 9 hits or whatever it is, or 9 total bases. You basically just have to bunt every time because he's only like a 20. Yeah, the infield fly. And on the infield fly, we're going to wrap this up tonight. And I really do appreciate everybody. Now that we've went down the road of when the Braves sucked, some of the horrible trades that the Braves have made, including the San Diego Padres, both of those deals. The conspiracy theory thing, let me finish this up. And I'm just going to give you a little bit of homework or something for you to think about, okay? As we wrap up on the Strike Zone tonight, I appreciate everybody that has joined in the chats, that has talked all night. This Joc Pederson deal is going to be extremely interesting, at least for the weekend, because this is a series by series thing when it comes to the Braves. Here's my conspiracy theory. Looking back at the All-Star game, okay? Because I know Yorkie's been trying to guess what the conspiracy theory is. There were 29 teams that were represented at the All-Star game. And I know what you're asking yourself. Wait, isn't every team represented at the All-Star game? Yes. Every team had players that were chosen to be representatives at the All-Star game. Go back and see which team ended up not sending any representatives. Shoot me a tweet when you figure it out at Joe Huck and let me know. Bam. Look, I didn't even have to finish it. Jeff answered it for me. The Astros did not send a representative to the All-Star game. They had 4 separate players that were chosen to be a part of the All-Star team. It's just kind of weird that they all said, nah, I don't want to go. That's all I'm saying. I appreciate every single person that hopped on tonight. Make sure that you join us next week on the Strike Zone podcast. If you happen to miss some of the show. This will be up on Apple Podcasts tomorrow. You can watch that, or you can watch it no matter where you are, or you can even listen to it on Apple Podcast, on Spotify, or anywhere else. I will see you next Thursday. In fact, I'll see you tomorrow on 3HL starting at 3 o'clock. Have a great night.